Welcome back to the Go on the Match podcast. Today I'm joined by a Groundhopper, Matt Barnes. Matt has seen football played in 18 different countries, the furthest being Barbados, and it's fair to say he's going to have some great stories. Matt, thanks for giving me your time today, mate, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
No, thanks for having me, Mike. It's always nice to talk to someone who's actually interested. I've bent the ear of my girlfriend for far too long now, and she doesn't know what I'm talking about. So, hopefully I can impart some wisdom.
Okay, so just for the listeners that may not know what a groundhopper is, can you kind of give us some understanding as to what it entails?
Yeah, I could certainly try. The short and easy answer is it's someone who goes to as many different grounds to see as many different games in as many different places. But to my mind, it's a bit more of it's almost more of a cult without the, brainwashing and that, or arguably there is some of that. Everyone's got their own rules and aims. You may have heard of doing the 92, which is the aim of seeing every stadium in the UK pyramid down to the League Two. Others, there's a really good book by a guy called Matt Walker, who in one season tried to see a match in all 55 of UEFA's nations in one season, which, he did it. Great book. Spoiler alert. But for me, part of the attraction for me is just going to places that aren't on the tourist trail. There's not many city breaks in Poznan that people go on, or Luxembourg, some of these overlooked places, really. And it is really a global phenomenon. I did a bit of a deep dive, an article I sort of wrote. I surveyed about 200 people, groundhoppers, where they're from, why they do it, and there was people from Trinidad and Tobago, Liechtenstein, Argentina, and obviously Germany, France, and all the usual. So, there's apps out there, there's books out there. It is a big thing, and it's a wonderful part of life to be involved in, I think.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I've seen a couple of things on groundhoppers and you kind of don't really understand it as much. But when you put it like that, the things you must see must be incredible. So what kind of, what got you into that? And, is that something you've always wanted to do, or did it kind of come about quite randomly?
To be honest, I sort of stumbled upon it. I didn't even know. I'd never heard of ground hopping or anything. I've always been into football, watched it since I was a kid, sort of watching, James Richardson on Football Italia on Channel 4, sort of opened my eyes to this world of football out there. But every time I'd go on a city break, I'd drag my long-suffering girlfriend along to a stadium tour and, show her the wonderful architecture of the San Siro or whatever. But then I sort of thought, well, I've come all this way. Why don't I go to a game? So, it was in Valencia one cold January afternoon, and I saw that Valencia were playing Espanyol, I think it was. And I was like, get some tickets, dirt cheap, Sunday morning, climbed up the steps of the Mestalla, sort of stopping for air along the way, gasping up the stairs. And I was just sat there and took it all in. You got these old men eating sunflower seeds, and just a completely different atmosphere to anything I'm used to in this country. And then from there I had a day and a half annual leave left towards the end of the year, and I sort of thought, okay, what can I do with this? Booked a flight to Rotterdam, went and saw Feyenoord, and that was a completely different experience. Bucketing it down with rain. I went to the training ground where all the ultras pre-drink. There's fireworks going off and the rain's belting down, flares and everything else, and then all of a sudden I was hooked. Okay, so Spain is different to Holland, where else can I go? And then 18 countries later and I'm still hooked.
Yeah, so it's almost like a legal drug. You wanting to see it, all these different atmospheres and how they chop and change, and the fan base, and like you touch on the culture there. And so is that both those things together when you go and experience these grounds? They're like, do they make that experience for you, not just the football in the 90 minutes, but the whole trip?
Yeah, exactly that. Part of the survey I did is one of the reasons why I did this article that I'll talk about a bit more later is football fans in general. If you're not a football fan, a match-going fan, you do get a bit of a bad rep. People think, especially the England away brigade, people go out there, have a booze and have a fight, and that's a small minority. But 60% of people I surveyed, culture was the main driver of why they go there. Something new. It was only 2% for the quality of football, and that's exactly right. Culture is Gabriele Marcotti, the Italian journalist, he said something and it really resonated with me. 90 minutes gets in the way of a good bit of wine, a good bit of food, some museums, you know. And I'm not an art buff or anything like that, but being in a city or a town where it's different to what you're used to, it just adds to it so much. Like, I'll give you an example. When I went to Barbados, and I was lucky enough to go there, and I don't need to tell anyone it's Caribbean, it's paradise. But I saw that there was a couple of football matches on. It's the Capelli Cup, whatever on earth that was. Two teams I'd never heard of, but I thought, okay, why not? Let me see, maybe I can write an article on this. So I emailed the Barbados sort of FA, and the president replied to me. His name's Randy. So it was the president of the Barbados FA, and I kind of likened him to a Bayesian Michel Platini, just without the corruption. He used to be a footballer, worked his way up, and then so the day came, left my girlfriend in the hotel, got in a rental car and sort of drove there, stopped off at the National Stadium, and there were these, kids just kicking a ball outside it, and it makes you think of the 70s or something, kids playing about outside Wembley. That just doesn't happen anymore. And then when you finally get into this stadium, is a grandiose term, it's sort of some bleachers, wildy turf, and you've got like jerk chicken being cooked and people drinking rum and smoking other illicit substances, and then I'm standing there, and let's put it this way, I don't look Caribbean, so I sort of stood out a bit, and this chap approached me and started talking to me, and I realised it was the president of the Barbados FA, and we're having a chat and that, and it's just this culture, that you just feel when you're there, because you're with normal people, we'll say, you're not necessarily doing the touristy things, but you're really getting an experience for that country and that city. I think football really is underrated. It does give that to you.
Yeah, it's like every episode I've done with all the different teams. When you do the away days, especially, you're not really, the 90 minutes, like you say, gets in the way, and it is about going trying the different cuisine and seeing the sights and these different places and experiencing, like the arse end of nowhere, really, that you would never go to if the football wasn't on. So I completely agree with you there. So when you're planning to visit these grounds, how do you arrange that? Because does it work like, so one week you will be at the San Siro watching Milan, and the next week you'll be at Vicarage Road watching Watford, or do you have to plan it out accordingly?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how it could happen. I mean, generally what I do is, before COVID, in my sort of glory days, I was lucky enough to sort of go every 6 weeks on a sort of European football weekend, and in between that, I'd just go wherever, basically. So how I'd plan it is when, that's probably the most important thing to consider. If you're going in the summer, there's only a few countries that have summer leagues: Republic of Ireland, the Baltics, Latvia, Estonia, that kind of thing, and Sweden. But if you're going in the winter, obviously you've got your more traditional European outposts. But then also, I look at where, so is there a chance of getting 2 matches in, 3 matches? Holland's great for that because it's a relatively small country. There's a great railway network, as is Germany. The Ruhr region is really, really good because, you can fly into Dusseldorf and you can get Schalke, Leverkusen, Dortmund, Gladbach, all those teams, on a wonderful train network. Yeah. But then it comes down to cost of flights. How I tend to do it is, I will generally go to any game. I'll be dictated to by the cost of flights. Go onto Skyscanner. Other comparisons are available, and there's a number of budget airlines that will offer you £10 return. Greta Thunberg won't like me for saying it, but if you can do those, flights, and air miles. Yeah. Air miles is a wonderful, wonderful thing I got into collecting. That's given me a number of quote unquote free flights. But then if it's a simple sort of midweek non-league trip, there's a great app out there called Footballogy. It used to be called the Groundhopper app. It's 2 Swedish guys, I think, made it. And basically what you can do is go onto the app, you can do nearby fixtures, 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers or whatever, and it tells you literally the nearest game to where you are now. So you can find out all these little non-league games that you may never have heard of. So really it's all about when do you want to go, and just go where the wind takes you, really.
So of all the grounds that you've been to, what was the best, and maybe not the worst atmosphere, but the one that disappointed you the most?
Yeah, I'll start with the worst first. Well, disappointing, like you say. Yeah. the Emirates is never a good atmosphere. As an Arsenal fan, I shouldn't say that, but it's true. I remember a couple of years ago, I went to Brussels to see Anderlecht in a Europa League game, and it was against Dinamo Zagreb, and they brought their bad blue boys, as they call them. I thought, this could be quite lively, but it was pre-Vincent Kompany before he returned to manage Anderlecht, and it was just a really sour atmosphere around the club. Tickets were like €10, but it was like a third full, and it was just no atmosphere, and it had a real negative vibe around it. But the food was good. Belgians do a great sausage. They do some wonderful Belgian beer. So, swings and roundabouts. In terms of best, wow, where do you start? I mean, very recently, just last month, in fact, I managed just about to get to Slovakia. It was one of the only countries that Brits could actually fly to and actually had football. And I was initially meant to go to see Slovan Bratislava in the capital, but there was sort of a COVID case. That game got called off, and it was chaos, last minute planning, blah, blah, blah. But I ended up in a small town about an hour outside of Bratislava. I won't try and pronounce it, because if you've got any Hungarian listeners, and it's a Hungarian town, I will offend them. But the team is DAC 1904, right? And it's an interesting town. It's right on the border of Hungary, and the road signs are in two different languages, Hungarian and Slovakian. So that's double the languages I can't speak, so that's really helpful. But it was like a local derby versus Spartak Trnava, and like I say, they've got a real Hungarian influence. I think the Hungarian president bankrolls this club, so they're sort of an upwardly mobile club. But it was, this was roughly a 12,000 capacity stadium, but because of the COVID regulations, it was cut down to half. But the wall of noise that roughly 6,000 people made with flares and banners and all that was just incredible. Generally, Eastern Europe is pretty good for atmosphere. Lech Poznan also went to, and massive stadium that they redid for Euro 2000 and can't remember. But, it was a third full yet again, but just pyro and just constant drumming that you just don't get in England, really. Yeah. Although I know Liverpool are trying to bring that ultra culture in somewhat, and it's it's pretty good. They've got the flares and the LA, etc. So we're trying, but yeah.
You've been to some pretty hostile places. You touched on there, Eastern Europe. You've been to Besiktas, Luxembourg. You must have some good stories to share, and a lot of those places are pretty moody, as it were. So have you got any good ones for us?
Yeah, I must say I've had a few hairy moments. Like, there are times when I'm sort of standing in the middle of a terrace, and I feel a bit like a sort of Louis Theroux type character. That at any moment it could turn naughty. There's a number of occasions. One time, quite early on in my ground hopping, when I was a bit naive, I guess, I bought a ticket to see Basel in Switzerland. And I sort of did research where the best atmosphere was in that terrace. So I ended up bang smack in the middle of the ultras, and I didn't know any better. They were all wearing their sort of matching navy blue, like, rain jackets. And I walk in, completely unwelcome, start taking pictures of them. Then this big geezer basically marched down the terrace and started speaking to me in Swiss. I was like, what's going on? You have to delete the pictures, otherwise, we'll throw you out. I was like, bloody hell. So I deleted them. Joke's on him, I got the last laugh. I got them out of my recycling bin later and put them on Instagram. But nonetheless, you learn these things. There's that sort of unspoken code about the ultras. It's omerta, you can't just walk in. That was my fault. I learned that. But there was another time where ultras were a bit more friendly. Luxembourg, they were playing Lithuania in a Euro 2020 qualifier. Really low quality match, but
kind of quite close together, those countries.
Not a million miles away, but Luxembourg, really, really well off country. Really high GDP per capita. You walk down the high street and there's Gucci and Prada and all this. So it was a real culture clash going there. And I sort of emailed the Luxembourg national team sort of fan coordinator. I was like, I'm coming from England. I'd love to sort of, have a drink with you. I'll buy you a beer, whatever, just sort of see what it's like. Yeah. Next thing I know, we're marching through the Luxembourg city, about 40, 50 deep, flares, drums, and we've got a police escort. And then there's this guy at the front, the capo, and he's just sort of stopping us at each point. And, he's like the ringleader. And then before you know it, we sort of stopped for 5-10 minutes, didn't know what was going on. And one guy explained to me we were meant to have a meet with the Lithuanian fans, but they didn't turn up. And I'm looking around, I'm like, I'm not going to fight Lithuania. I'm not going to fight anyone. Yeah. I'm looking at these big guys. I'm thinking, okay, if I just stand at the back, it shouldn't be too bad. But then the police came and escorted us all the way to the ground, and that was a bit tasty. But then there was another occasion where I almost got arrested by the counter-terrorism police in Tilburg in the Netherlands. So I went to see Willem II, and the Netherlands ultras are quite lively anyway, so I'm standing in the terrace. This time I deliberately booked a ticket not with the ultras, but it turns out the ultras spilled round. But this guy was talking to me and he was sort of saying, they're the guys that make the atmosphere, pointed at himself, and we're the guys that make the fights. Oh, Jesus, why does this keep happening to me, But anyway, so I was, taking pictures of the match, watching the game. Sort of 5 minutes before full time, I had to catch a train back to Eindhoven. As I'm leaving, the Dutch counter-terrorism police stopped me and sort of said, "You've been taking pictures. We think you've been doing hostile reconnaissance." I'm like, whoa. That's definitely not the case. So I got my passport out. They rung some checks through. God knows who to, Interpol or British police. I've no idea. After about 15 minutes of thinking, I'm going to spend at least a night in a Dutch cell here, they thankfully let me go and sent me on my way. But yeah, there's been a few moments where sort of squeaky bum time, to put it lightly.
So I believe you're an Arsenal fan. Obviously, you'll have a passion for Arsenal, but is there any clubs or stadiums you've been to where you felt like you have a similar passion, or after you've experienced the whole trip, you've got a bit of a soft spot for them?
Yeah, so, I mean, for the 90 minutes I'm there, 90 plus minutes, I'm a fan of any club, really. I'm anyone's for the right price. But there's been a few clubs I've seen where I've come away and I sort of thought, they're doing things the right way. I remember when I went to see Enfield Town. I'm not local to Enfield. I've got no affiliations with them, but I went to see them in this trophy. It was a Brian Lomax Cup, and they were playing FC United of Manchester. And the idea of it was fan-owned clubs, and I really like that sort of ethos. Germany do it really, really well, with the exception of the energy drink merchants. They've got that sort of 50+1 system where, and it just makes the fans closer to the club, especially if, they're shareholders or part owners, or however you want to put it. And they've got a beautiful Art Deco stadium. I think it's Grade 2 listed. If anyone's near Enfield, get yourself down there. It's definitely worth it. And Valencia as well, because I remember, obviously, that's my first European football trip. I remember watching them back in the early 2000s, David Villa, Pablo Aimar, Vicente. But now, you're looking at them in a completely different story. They've got a dodgy owner in Peter Lim. All their players are going on strike. Their new stadium isn't finished. Their best players are leaving. But yeah, there are a couple of clubs I guess I'll always have a soft spot for, just because they mean something. There's that sort of sentimental attraction, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I put myself in your shoes, going to those clubs that have that tradition. So coming away from the PSGs, your Leipzigs, even Man City to a certain extent. You must get so much more from going and seeing those sort of more traditional clubs than you do those, the money-driven ones, should we say?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're spot on. I mean, I went to see Bayern Munich, and I know, they're a super club. They've done things the right way. It just felt a bit sort of sterile and touristy, whereas when you go and see either a fan-owned club or sort of middle-of-the-table club in a working-class area, it just feels a bit more, real and gritty and less sanitized, less corporate, I guess. Yeah.
So finally, the podcast is centered around Go in the Match. So with every podcast we're doing, I want to end by asking, what are your top 3 favourite matches you've been to? So it doesn't have to be based on the 90 minutes itself. It can be something that happened during the day or for whatever reason. So I'm sure you've got plenty there.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I guess in no particular order. I think it was, to be honest, I don't even know what year it is this year, let alone when it was. But it was the UEFA Nations League. I went to see Portugal, Switzerland in Porto at the Estadio do Dragão. And I don't know if you've ever been, but Porto is a wonderful, wonderful city. It really is. They do this sandwich called the Franceschino, which will give you a heart attack. So it's basically toasted bread. It's got cheese. It's got beef. It's got everything drizzled over in beer sauce and cheese sauce. Wonderful delicacy. This is what I mean about the culture, right? You go there for the culture.
Yeah.
But the match itself, you know, is Portugal. Got to see one of the greats in Ronaldo. He scored a hat trick. But this is going to sound really strange, but the highlight, with the exception of the vocal minority of England fans that had snuck in, you know, typical certain England fans trying to cause trouble or whatever, there was this like Portuguese dad and his son was just entranced by watching, you know, his hero, his icon. And I could imagine, you know, when I was that age, if I went to see, I don't know, Thierry Henry or whatever, I probably would have been a bit older than him, but still, he was just encapsulated by watching Ronaldo do his thing. And I just thought, you know, when I have a son one day, I'd love to be able to take him to see whoever the great is, Raheem Sterling or, you know, Phil Foden maybe, who knows. So yeah, that was just a wonderful experience. Another one, weirdly enough, you know, considering I've been all around Europe watching football, it's a stadium that's a 10-minute walk from my house, Charlton Athletic. So I went to see, they were playing Doncaster in the League One playoff semi-final, so a couple of years back now. And it was second leg. Long story short, you know, Charlton went through on penalties, but I just sensed something in the crowd. You know, Charlton bought a few flares. There was real atmosphere. You know, there was sort of, it was almost like Charlton were against Doncaster, but they were against, yet again, their dodgy owners, you know, Dulachet and the Belgian crew and all that sort of thing. And as the final penalty kick went in for Charlton, there was just this huge pitch invasion, and I sort of got swept up in it. It was on the pitch, you know. Don't support Charlton. Have no feelings for them whatsoever, but just being part of that, one of those euphoric moments that I can imagine a Charlton fan would tell his grandkids down the line, you know, is quite something. And I guess another one that really sticks out to me is just in January, in fact, I went to the San Siro to see Inter versus Atalanta. Run-of-the-mill sort of Serie A match. You know, it was nice to see Inter under Conte with Lautaro Martinez and Lukaku and all that. And Atalanta were playing some scintillating attacking football, but you know, the game finished 1-1. The game was relatively average, but there's a reason why the locals call it the Scala del Calcio, you know, the theatre of football. It's, for my money, it's the best stadium in the world. And it is an absolute crime that they're probably going to knock it down and build a new one. It shouldn't be done, but just walking in and just taking this majestic stadium with its, you know, sort of curved turrets. I think the Etihad have tried to copy, and just the steel and the lights, and it honestly it was like coming to God moment. You know, it's just unbelievable, and I'll never forget that. Just standing high up in the San Siro, but yeah, those are the memories really that I love making.
If you have to put on the San Siro there, you have to put your finger on one thing that makes it so unique. What would you say it was?
Oh, it's a good question. I think the sheer size of it. I mean, like I said, I've been to Wembley and the Allianz in Munich, and Wembley's certainly bigger, but it just has this, it's so square, and it really just takes over the sort of horizon. You know, once you're walking up to it, you can see it from a good mile away. But also, like I say, I grew up watching Football Italia, and you've seen, you know, all the great Zlatan playing there, you know, Rijkaard, Gullit, you know, Ronaldo, the original Ronaldo, and new Ronaldo's probably played there. And it's just got this majesty. I think it was around in the 1920s, you know, all the great teams of AC and Inter have both played there. I think it's got this legend to it that not really, there ain't that many stadiums, I think, that have that sort of mystique to it, that it's just this palpable atmosphere when you walk in, and it doesn't matter if it's a mid-table Serie A team playing. It's got something, you know. So to answer your question, I can't put it into words, but yeah. It is a wonderful place.
I think I know what you mean, because I did Roma a couple of years ago with Liverpool in the semi-final of the Champions League. Going to the Olimpico, I get that same feel, and it's like the aura of the stadium, because, you know, it being oval, and it was just, yeah. It's hard to put your finger on exactly what it is, but there's something in the atmosphere, there's something in the air that makes it, you know, so old school and so legendary, I suppose is the word.
I think Italy have a lot of that, because a lot of their stadiums are sort of owned by the municipality they're in. You know, where Juventus, one of the reasons why they got such a competitive advantage is they own and built their own stadium. And I know there's now a drive, this sort of foreign investment into the Italian game, and they see that as a really, really good thing. As a traditionalist of the stadium, you know, I don't, but I understand why the money makers want to get it. I mean, I've been lucky enough to go to Sampdoria, the Stadio Luigi Ferrari, and that is just, again, a wonderful, wonderful stadium. Been to Juventus Stadium, it's okay, but there's not those memories there ingrained in every seat, you know. But you can't get in the way of progress, so I'm told.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic way to finish the pod there, mate. You've definitely seen some sights. So before you go, just a massive thank you for coming on and giving your time up.
No, Mike, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
If you haven't already, please subscribe, follow and share. And of course, leave a 5-star rating.